The adulterous bride, marriage is one of the most sacred acts given to mankind. This is because it is a covenant that overtly symbolizes the union between God and us. Christ being the groom and the bride being us. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. In the church, it is known and understood that the only grounds for divorce is infidelity. Jesus even goes so far as to say that a woman who is divorced and marries another man has committed adultery. Both she and that man is guilty of adultery. He'll show you. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So taking all of this into account, you would think the perfect image of marriage between Christ and the church would be as a reference in perfect alignment with his law. A faithful groom and a faithful bride coming into perfect union without error, because not to err is godly, right? See, the interesting thing is that this is not the case. It's a completely different story. Here is the story. God chooses Israel out of all the nations to be his own. God enters covenant with the nation of Israel officially. This symbolizes marriage. Israel breaks covenant with God and goes into covenants with other gods, the Baals. This symbolizes divorce and remarriage on the bride's part. God judges the bride, but he does this to draw her back. Israel goes into covenant with other gods. God judges Israel and takes her back. This happens so much that God goes from Israel to the Gentiles. The Gentiles are now a part of the bride, but this was partly to provoke Israel to jealousy. Israel comes back to Jesus in the end. Israel becomes the bride that she was always meant to be, pure, beautiful, and redeemed. God likened his love story with Israel to one of loving a prostitute. When I read into this, it made me think, wouldn't this break his law? But if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife. When a man takes a wife and marries her, if then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house. And if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband, who sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. And you shall not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. So Jesus' relationship with Israel would technically be breaking his law. Does that mean God is a sinner, BC? He transgressed the law? But we know from that, God does not sin. So how is this possible? Grace, mercy. Grace is when the law is overlooked and judgment not carried out because of love. To love is godly. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Christ's marriage with the church is the perfect image of marriage, but it is not an image of perfect adherence to the law, but instead one of grace and what's more, redemption. Now people will attempt to misuse this message. This isn't an excuse to cheat. Like Jesus has in Israel, you have a spouse that God has assigned you. If that person has been revealed to you by God, but that person goes astray and gets with someone else for whatever reason, remember the grace that Jesus had on his bride.